Racing Hotline. Dan Beaver joins us. Hey, Dan, how are you?
I'm doing fine. How are you guys doing?
We're doing good. Charlie's got the sniffles, though. He's snotting all over the place here.
Yeah, there's a picture for you.
Yeah.
We are joined, of course, by Dan Beaver, who's a fantasy racing expert and writer for NASCAR.com and YahooSports.com. Joins us every week here for our fantasy racing segment. And how'd you do at the mile and a half or at Las Vegas, Dan?
I'm not sure if this is an indication of how well I did at Las Vegas or how poorly I did in the first two races, but I doubled my Yahoo points. So.
Yeah.
A little bit. We'll go with a little bit of both.
I sort of know what that's like, a lot. So yeah.
I was pretty darn happy. All of my drivers were in the top 10 except for my Group C driver, and I had the best Group C driver, Ricky Stenhouse. So I couldn't have asked for too much more, except maybe the crystal ball that told me to pick Casey Kane or Matt Kenseth. But
right.
I was pretty happy with my picks.
It does sort of look like, with the only one race in, of course, that the mile and a halfers may be as predictable as they have been in the past. The guys that you would expect to be good, I think, were good at Vegas, and that helps. That makes what you do a little bit easier, I would think, anyway.
It does, and so much effort goes into those tracks that the cream rises to the top, and it should be pretty easy to identify what that cream is.
And then we go to Bristol. And, Bristol is one of those racetracks that is often mentioned with the word
it's a wild card.
Wild card.
It's a wild card
Talladega
race.
and Bristol are wild cards. But I don't find Bristol, to me, to be as much of a wild card as that. I mean, there are drivers that consistently have done well at Bristol. Drivers who've won a lot of races there. What, Rusty Wallace won like 11 times there or something?
He doesn't race no more, though.
I know that. But Kurt Busch has had a stellar career at Bristol. Do you find it Bristol to be more predictable than you would think a quote-unquote wild card track would be, Dan?
Yeah, I think of Bristol as a rhythm track. Drivers have to hit those precise marks lap after lap after lap. And for that reason, it isn't a wild card. I think sometimes we like to blame things on accidents that can't be blamed on accidents. Matt Kenseth and Tony Stewart's tussle last fall would be a good example. And if they had shown a little more patience, if Stewart had shown a little more patience, probably, then he would have finished as well as he ran. Matt Kenseth, maybe that's a slightly different story there. But he showed just as little patience in that one race as Stewart did. Up until then, he had a great record on this track, and probably should be a favorite. And he probably burned quite a few fantasy players for that. But I don't know that fits in the category of wild card so much as it does trying to understand what was going through those two drivers' minds at that part of the season. Kenseth might have been a good driver to avoid because he was getting ready to leave, to leave and go to Joe Gibbs Racing, and maybe he wasn't as patient as he could have been. Was it foreseeable? Not entirely, but it wasn't entirely a surprise either.
Well, okay, we're going to Bristol, and we have to, you have to make Yahoo picks, and that's being the big game. What's your Yahoo team going to look like? I'm sure it's going to be different than it was at Vegas. What are you looking like this week?
Honestly, it's not going to be much different than it was at Vegas.
Really?
There's a convergence of momentum and drivers with good records that can drive this week's, that can help you understand this week's roster. Jimmy Johnson has been great in the first three races of this season. He's great at Bristol. He enters with 7 top 10 finishes that include, I think, 5 top 5 finishes in his last 8 starts. He's got 3 top 10s so far this season, worst finish of 6. I think he's got to be a favorite for that reason. Matt Kenseth did well at Vegas. He might not have been on my roster, and he wasn't on my roster, but he should also do well here at Bristol because Joe Gibbs is strong here, Kenseth is strong here, and he entered last fall's race with a 5-race streak of top 10s. Kyle Busch won quite a few races between 2009 and 2011. Softened a little bit over the last 3 events, but he's got momentum on his side. He's coming off his best race of the season last week, and he's got to be, I think, your top Group B driver. So I think that you could stand pat from Vegas if you had those drivers on your roster. If you didn't, now's the time to jump on their bandwagon and carry some of their momentum. But there are also some good dark horses. Paul Menard finished in the top 10, or finished 10th, actually, in both races last year, and has 3 top 10s in his last 4 starts. If you want to roll the dice a little bit and take someone that your competition's probably not going to take, then Kenseth is a great Menard would be a great choice there.
Is this a track that you have to kind of guard against overthinking it? Because I would think this could be a place where you just gave all the reasons to take Jimmy Johnson in this race. But I can certainly see some fantasy players thinking, I'm not taking Johnson here because he's too good at, XYZ track down the road, and I don't want to use up a start here, or he could get wrecked in a big wreck. Is that a danger? Is that overthinking it, or is that a viable strategy?
I don't know, but one of the subheads in this week's Yahoo story is going to be paradoxes. You hear the term patient aggression a lot. It's an oxymoron, perhaps, but it's also a paradox. You have to have both things, and that's one of those paradoxes, I think. Yes, it's easy to think of Johnson as being a slam dunk on courses like the unrestricted intermediate speedways, the cookie cutter tracks.
Right.
But points are points. And I preach a lot about allocation management. I don't necessarily subscribe to the notion that you can't you just take a driver when they're hot and you run them as long as they're hot. I think you got to take a Denny Hamlin on a short track. Or a short flat track. You've got to take a Jimmy Johnson on a cookie cutter track when you can. But when they've got momentum, I think you've got to balance that allocation management with riding the momentum. And Bristol's a great track for that. You've got to be patiently aggressive. You've got to be diplomatic as well as a hard charger on the track, or you get into a situation like Stewart and Kenseth did last year. So you've got to find that perfect balance at Bristol, and I think that's one of the things that makes this track so exciting for the fans. You've got the action that never stops, but it also makes it pretty exciting for the fantasy player.
How high will you value Kurt Busch in the Furniture Row car here? I mean, Kurt has a great, at least somewhat back in time, great history at Bristol. Do you still give any credence to that? Is that car good enough for him to compete there?
I think it's hard to say that it's not good enough for him to compete there. He strung together 3 top 10s at the end of last year. But at the beginning of this year, he seems to be the Kurt Busch that we experienced at the beginning of last year when he was in James Finch's machinery. He's tearing it up. He overdrives. He's not patient. I'm not going to take him, and I wouldn't recommend taking him. But by the same token, I wouldn't be surprised to see him run in the top 10 for most of the day. And if he manages to stay away from the wall, I think that's probably a big assumption, then he will get a top 10 finish. He's got the talent. He just doesn't have the personality, at least recently, to drive within the means of the car, to drive as well as the car will go, but no further.
All right, I don't think we got a real quick C driver pick from you for Yahoo, did we? Did I miss that? I don't think we did.
We didn't, and some of that's by C is a lot harder to select than some of the other
I would think
categories this year. But you've got Allmendinger back in the number 51 car this week. He's had some good runs there in the past. I think Allmendinger's probably the go-to guy this week.
Yeah, he had a good run. Had a good run at Phoenix too. So
he did, and you've got that balance of allocation management still. Danica Patrick, Ricky Stenhouse, maybe even Bobby Labonte, you're going to exhaust before the year is done. A.J. Allmendinger, you're probably not going to exhaust because you're never really sure where he's going to show up.
Right.
So that makes him a good pick from that standpoint too.
All right, Dan, we'll put you on the spot. Who's your pick to win at Bristol?
I think he shows the right balance this week. Isn't overly aggressive, and Kyle Busch wins the race.
Yeah, he's my pick too. How about that? Brilliant minds think somewhat alike.
Guys are wrong.
Okay. And Steve has the counterpoint.
Kevin Harvick.
Oh, that's a good pick there.
Kevin Harvick to win. Alex.
Beth Ann, who's your choice at Bristol?
I think Kevin Harvick's a pretty bold choice. He hasn't been in his top 5 since 2008 at Bristol. So,
well, I love a dark horse.
Steve don't let intelligence get in the way.
No, I pick these babies from my gut.
What do you like, Beth?
My gut tells me this is the year.
Oh, I also have to congratulate Charlie on winning last week's NASCAR Fantasy Live League, the Experts League. So.
Yeah, I looked at my picks as like, what the hell? Why would I change anything? Well, that's nice. That'll probably be the only time that ever happens, but thank you. No? You got a pick? We're trying to get Beth Ann's going to hold down and pick off the air, I think. Dan, thanks again for your time this week. He is, of course, Dan Beaver. You can follow him on Twitter at Fantasy Race. Read his insight into fantasy racing and fantasy NASCAR, particularly at yahoosports.com and NASCAR.com, and listen to him right here next week when we talk about the aftermath of Bristol. Thanks, Dan. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, Dan.
Bye.